you and I can agree on a lot of things that have really upset us in the way that our country is being led right now. And that was really a lot what led me to say, okay, it's that time for me to say I'm going to move on and I'm going to try to pursue this, and I'm going to try to be a voice in our house that leads without regard for gain and without regard for sacrifice. And that's what I've told people. I think that's what we're missing up there is people serving in Congress the way that every one of our service members do on the battlefield, without regard for personal gain or sacrifice.
Now, I really wish we had more people like that, because obviously when you head up to Washington, D.C., or down or over from wherever your perspective in the country is, that you're immediately hit with all kinds of perks and money and people, waving bundles of cash for your personal gain. But there are those that refuse that and seem to do very well. Now, and I try to say that I've done that already. To some degree, I don't mind telling you stories about that. I say, number one, look, my legs are not going to grow back anytime soon. And the fact remains that if I wanted to, I could go down right now and start collecting Social Security disability, even though I'm perfectly capable of going to work every single day. I've been working since the day I left the military, but I could still go down and collect Social Security disability. That's not a means-tested system. Or one of the other examples that I give is that, a lot of our service members coming home basically suffer from what's known as post-traumatic stress, and that's something that has not affected me. But when I woke up at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, that was something that was foisted upon me, that they said, okay, you were blown up in Afghanistan, you now have PTS. And I said, no, I don't. I'm perfectly fine. I couldn't be more at peace with everything that I did on the battlefield, and I'm perfectly all right. And they said, no, you definitely have this. If you don't have this, you're giving up another $2,000 to $3,000 a month in retirement bonuses, because you can be rated 100% and permanently totally disabled just based on PTS alone. And I said, no, I'm perfectly at peace, and this is something I don't have. And I actually had to fight more vigorously than I would have had to simply say, if I would have said, yeah, I do have PTS, they would have said, okay, you have it. But I had to fight and go through extensive cognitive testing for them to say, okay, fine, we won't rate you for this, and we won't give you an extra $2,000 to $3,000 a month in retirement. And so I try to say, you know what, I'm not in this for the personal gain. Why would they do that to you or to anyone?
It's probably a two-pronged problem. Part of it is what went on at Walter Reed Army Medical Center previous, early on in the war, where there was a lot of problems with the care that soldiers were receiving. And so really, people became so back on their heels that they didn't want anything to go wrong, and they became afraid to question anything whatsoever. And basically, they swung in the wrong direction, saying, okay, everybody has this. Because we don't want to question it, we're going to say that everybody is suffering from PTS. And now it becomes something that, because of the compensation that's given for it, it becomes a matter of almost a moral dilemma.
Now, your opponent is going to be Representative Alan Grayson, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Some of my opponents, this is going to be an open seat. The incumbent is a person named Patrick Murphy. Patrick Murphy beat Alan West for this seat back in 2012. And he's an individual that's announced he's running for the Senate. So it's going to be an open seat. Now, there are a few Democrats that have come out and announced their candidacy.
Oh, okay. Alan West's old seat. Yeah, they jerry-rigged that seat when they did redistricting in order to sort of help force Colonel West out of that position, and you're going to be in there trying to fight to regain that position. Good for you.
I'm going to try to fight the good fight.
Now, what are some of the things that you're seeing in your district that you think are different from the Democrats? Because you're running as a Republican, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And, I think I just touched upon one of those things. It's not necessarily first on my list, but it's certainly high on my list, and that's government accountability. I just brought up the fact that
If I needed to right now, I could go out and collect Social Security disability. That's a problem with government accountability. I've worked in our U.S. Army for 12 years and a month. I've worked for various government agencies, and I can tell you that the way that accounting goes in these systems is not a system of accountability. It's a system where you're basically rewarded for using every single penny of the budget that you can, instead of it. If you were in the private sector, where you would be rewarded for saying, hey, I figured out a place where we could save a few dollars and make this a more lean operation, and that's not the way it works in the federal government. So government accountability is certainly something that's high on my priority list. As a U.S. service member and as really just as an American, national security is number one on my list, and that can be whether you're talking about ISIS or whether you're talking about education or whether you're talking about immigration. I consider them all to be very high on the list of national security.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things about in national security is immigration, illegal immigration especially, and open borders. And now some people have thought that Senator Rubio is a little bit wishy-washy on that. What is your position on that?
Well, I like to think that before we have any conversation about what we're going to do about those that have already immigrated into the United States, that we first secure the borders. I'm absolutely for that. I don't think the conversation can be had before that. Beyond that, I really look at it as a national security issue with not just the southern border, but the northern border open as well. And, I have to say that after that, I don't think I'm really willing to have any conversation about blanket amnesty whatsoever. I don't support any blanket program. I don't see as that being an efficient way for government to operate, saying that we're going to do a one-size-fits-all approach to anything, and that's what blanket anything, especially blanket amnesty, is. So I don't support that in any way.
Now, some conservatives advocate using the military to secure the borders. Do you think that is a prudent application?
I think that's up to the states to decide if they want to use those border states, if they want to use their National Guard to secure those borders, and they see that as the best route to maintain that sovereignty. Then they're best equipped to judge that. But it's something that's absolutely a concern to all of us. When we talk about what President Obama is doing with amnesty, and we say this isn't something that's just going to be where the bill is going to be footed by the federal government. When you're talking about amnesty, every city and town and state, they're the ones that bear the cost of this blanket amnesty that they're pushing for. When you're talking about the cost of public education, the cost of food stamps, the cost of fire, the cost of police, the cost of housing assistance, these are things that affect every local government, and that's why it really needs to become an issue at the forefront for everybody.
Now, it sounds like you're a bit of a states' rights advocate, and there are a lot of people out there that would like that to be the case. Are you big
Absolutely.
on states' rights? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely the truth. I think it's a conversation that we can especially have this week when we're talking about what went on with the issue of gay marriage, and basically the Supreme Court taking it upon themselves to say we're going to be a legislating body and take the right away from the states, which is something that Scalia had a dissent on this opinion on this ruling, and I want to say it's something like maybe 10 or 15 years back. He had a very similar dissent on a case called Lawrence v. Texas, where he was saying, hey, this is basically the end of morals legislation for the states, and you hate to see the states lose their ability to have that piece of the democratic system.
Yeah, it is quite troubling that this is the third, well, at least the third time that the Supreme Court has weighed in and sort of rewritten the law to make it sound or mean something that wasn't originally intended. Now, speaking of that, there's also the big brouhaha over the first Supreme Court decision over Obamacare, and now recently with last week's decision on one of the provisions of Obamacare. Do you think that we really should repeal it?
I am a repeal and replace Obamacare candidate, and I don't think what's gone on with the Supreme Court ruling has changed the need to do this. It's altered the conversation. It's kicked the can down the road a little bit. But for those of us that see these issues with Obamacare or with the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't change our minds in saying this needs to be repealed and replaced.
Okay, now when you say replace, now a lot of people might think of that as, well, that sounds like what Bonnier and the group are talking about, replacing, coming up with their own big government version. What exactly do you mean by replace?
So for me, I've always been a proponent of individual health savings accounts. This is something that Newt Gingrich has been putting forward for years. And basically the idea that you have a program that gives incentive for not pursuing care that you really don't need. Like I give the example of saying, I'm on two prosthetic legs pretty much every single day of my life. But you know what? I never use a wheelchair. I always use my prosthetics. But regardless of that fact, if I wanted to, I could go out right now and I could tell the Department of Veterans Affairs that I want a new wheelchair, and they would probably flip the bill for that for $3,000-$4,000 for a new wheelchair, even though I wouldn't use it at all. And the idea of individual health savings accounts is that because it's a savings account in your own name, that you do not seek care that you're not needing. So I wouldn't seek a wheelchair that I don't need, because that's taking something that's essentially in my own pocket out of it. And it gives basically a system of accountability to the healthcare system.
Now, one of the big issues for a lot of people is our national debt. I mean, Puerto Rico is on the verge of defaulting, and you have some of the candidates like Jeb Bush saying that they support a Chapter 9 bankruptcy for Puerto Rico. Well, what about the federal government? Because obviously, in this particular case, the Fed is going to have to try to step in and put some money in there to try to keep it afloat.
And we saw Greece today, right, talking about that they may have to default on their debt.
Right. So we're, 18 trillion plus. How do you see us reining in this runaway debt?
I don't think that's an easy question to answer whatsoever, but I think it has to be accomplished one bill, one program, one anything at a time. That everything, people take a look at this, congressmen and senators and the executive branch take a look at this and say, okay, we need to find a way to become statesmen again, to work together and to look at this and say, this is where we cannot spend, this is where we cannot spend, this is a priority, this is where we have to spend, and basically go through it in a very methodical way and be accountable to the people that you represent. Say, okay, the people of the United States of America are entrusting us with their tax dollars, which we take off of their plate, and they're trusting that we're going to spend this in a wise way. And let's make sure that we do that. And, for me, one of the examples that I give, I know a lot of people say that they're proponents for a balanced budget amendment. And I often say, I'm not a proponent for a balanced budget amendment. I'm a proponent for a surplus budget amendment. I think that, most people aren't just happy saying, okay, I broke even, but they're happy when they actually put a little money away for a rainy day. And I think the government needs to be basically fashioned in the exact same way, where they say, okay, we're going to have a surplus, and beyond that surplus, we're going to use that to incrementally pay down any debt that we have, and we're also going to use that to incrementally decrease tax burden on the people, and that's where I see that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that are really looking at the tax issue and that they're being overtaxed. My state personally doesn't have state sales, general sales, or income tax, and I know Florida is also a one of the lower tax burden states, so we kind of get the benefit of that. But there's the issue of the IRS too, and of course, Lois Lerner, we've learned that they've erased some of her emails even after they were subpoenaed. Do you see yourself, once you're in the House, of being on the side of pursuing this more on a legal process?
Absolutely. It's a responsibility to the people that if, somebody was going out there attacking individuals based on their position in the IRS or any other government agencies, individuals or groups, then that absolutely needs to be pursued. That's a misuse of the government trust and the government power. And the only way probably to help anybody regain that trust, if it's even possible to help somebody regain that trust, is to make sure you go after those accountable. I don't think there's a question in that.
Well, geez. Well, we're just about out of time for this hour. I know you have to run, but tell everybody how they can learn a little bit more about you and possibly support you if they wanted to.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. And people can find me on my website at www.mastforcongress.com, or they can find me on Twitter at BrianMastFL, or they can find me on Facebook as well.
All right, Brian, I really do appreciate you being here. Definitely, ladies and gentlemen, another American hero who is continuing to try to serve his country. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.
Folks, we will be right back.